Most people believe respect comes from proving themselves. They talk more, explain more, defend more, and try harder to convince others of their value. Yet if you observe social dynamics carefully, you begin to notice something unexpected. The people who often command the most respect are not always the loudest or the most expressive. In many situations, they are the ones who speak less. They listen longer. They reveal less about themselves. And when they finally speak, people pay attention. This pattern appears in workplaces, friendships, leadership, and even casual social gatherings. Silence, when used intentionally, creates psychological weight. The human mind automatically assigns meaning to what is withheld. When someone talks constantly, their words lose rarity. But when someone speaks selectively, their words gain importance. The brain interprets scarcity as value. This is a basic cognitive bias. If information is limited, it appears more significant. When a person fills every moment with explanations, opinions, and reactions, there is nothing left for others to interpret. But when someone remains composed and quiet, people begin to project assumptions onto that silence. They assume confidence. They assume control. They assume intelligence. This happens because most individuals reveal their internal state through speech. Nervous people talk excessively to release tension. Insecure people over-explain to justify themselves. Anxious people rush to fill quiet moments because the silence feels uncomfortable. But someone who appears comfortable in silence sends a different signal. They appear regulated, self-contained, unbothered by external judgment. The human brain interprets this calm restraint as social power. Another reason silence generates respect is because it shifts attention. In conversations, people often compete subtly for influence. Interruptions, fast responses, and strong opinions are ways of asserting presence. But when one person chooses not to compete, the dynamic changes. Instead of pushing for attention, they create space. And paradoxically, that space often draws attention toward them. People start watching their reactions more carefully. They begin wondering what the quiet person is thinking. Curiosity replaces noise. Over time, the quiet individual becomes the psychological center of the interaction. Their silence functions almost like gravity. It pulls awareness toward them without effort. There's also a strategic element to speaking less. When you talk continuously, you reveal your emotional state, priorities, and vulnerabilities very quickly. Others gain information about how you react under pressure. But when you speak selectively, your internal landscape remains partially hidden. This ambiguity gives you psychological flexibility. People cannot easily predict your next move or reaction, and unpredictability often increases perceived authority. This is why experienced negotiators, leaders, and therapists often rely on silence as a tool. They allow pauses to exist. They let others fill those pauses with additional information. In many conversations, the person who speaks second learns more than the person who speaks first. Silence also amplifies listening. When you stop preparing your next statement, you begin noticing more subtle details in the conversation. Tone changes, hesitations, emotional shifts in the other person's voice. These cues provide valuable information about motivations and concerns. Someone who listens deeply often understands a situation better than someone who dominates the discussion, and understanding naturally leads to better decisions. But the power of silence is frequently misunderstood. Speaking less does not mean withdrawing from interaction or appearing cold. It means being intentional with communication. Instead of reacting immediately, you allow yourself time to observe. Instead of explaining every thought, you choose which ideas truly need expression. This selective approach changes the rhythm of conversation. Your words become measured rather than impulsive, and measured communication often signals maturity. Many people fear silence because they believe it creates awkwardness. In reality, awkwardness usually comes from uncertainty about how to behave. When one person remains calm in silence, others often follow that emotional cue. The moment becomes reflective rather than uncomfortable. In fact, some of the most meaningful conversations contain long pauses. Those pauses allow thoughts to settle and emotions to surface. Without them, dialogue becomes superficial. There is also a psychological boundary created by speaking less. When someone explains themselves constantly, they invite continuous evaluation. Others feel entitled to judge or challenge every statement. But when someone expresses themselves concisely and then stops, the conversation shifts. Their statement stands on its own. They do not chase approval. And that independence often earns quiet respect. People sense when someone is not trying to win validation from a room. That calm detachment communicates self-trust, and self-trust is contagious. When others see it, they instinctively treat that person with greater seriousness. However, learning to speak less is not simply about reducing words. It is about transforming how you relate to attention. Many people talk excessively because they feel responsible for maintaining social energy. They believe conversations must be constantly filled, reactions must be immediate, and every opinion must be shared. This creates pressure to perform socially. But when you remove that pressure, interactions become calmer and more authentic. You begin responding rather than reacting. Instead of trying to prove intelligence or personality, you allow your presence to communicate confidence. Another important shift occurs when you become comfortable with observation. Most conversations reveal far more information than people realize. Small inconsistencies in language often expose underlying concerns. Someone might claim they are confident about a decision, yet their tone carries hesitation. Someone might laugh while describing a stressful situation, yet their posture shows tension. These signals become clearer when you are not busy speaking. Silence sharpens perception, and perception improves judgment. This is why many individuals who naturally speak less develop strong intuitive understanding of people. They accumulate observations quietly over time. Eventually patterns emerge. They learn which behaviors signal sincerity and which signal performance. This awareness allows them to navigate relationships more effectively. But silence also creates internal clarity. When you stop expressing every passing thought, your mind begins filtering ideas more carefully. You become aware of which opinions are truly meaningful and which are simply reactions to the moment. This mental filtering improves communication quality. When you do speak, your words carry intention rather than impulse, and intention is noticeable. People sense when someone has thought carefully before speaking. The conversation slows down slightly. The atmosphere becomes more attentive. In many professional environments, this quality is associated with leadership. Leaders who speak sparingly often appear more decisive because their statements are deliberate. Each sentence feels like a conclusion rather than a reaction. This perception increases influence without requiring dominance. Another interesting effect of speaking less is that others begin revealing more about themselves. Silence invites disclosure. When one person leaves conversational space open, the other person often fills it by elaborating further. They add details, clarify emotions, and sometimes reveal information they had not planned to share. This dynamic is widely used in counseling, interviewing, and negotiation. The quiet listener becomes a recipient of deeper insights, simply by allowing room for them to emerge. Over time, this process builds trust. People feel heard rather than managed. They sense that their thoughts matter because someone is willing to listen without interruption. Respect grows naturally in such environments. Yet it is important to remember that silence must come from confidence rather than fear. If someone remains quiet because they feel intimidated or uncertain, others can often detect that hesitation. Respectful silence is calm and grounded. It communicates that the person is comfortable observing before participating. They do not rush to occupy space because they trust their presence already belongs there. This distinction changes everything. The goal is not to become distant or mysterious. It is to become deliberate. When you speak, you choose clarity over quantity. You avoid unnecessary explanations. You allow your statements to stand without immediate defense. Gradually, people adjust their behavior around you. They interrupt less. They listen more closely. Conversations become slower and more thoughtful. And without forcing it, you gain influence simply through composure. In the end, respect rarely comes from how much someone says. It comes from how secure they appear while saying it. When a person demonstrates that they do not need constant approval, their words carry different weight. Silence becomes a signal of stability rather than absence, and that stability is what people instinctively respect.